right, I will call the August 24th meeting to order. Do we have any suggested additions to the agenda or comments on the meeting minutes? Or a motion to approve the agenda as is and the meeting minutes as is, and then we can move forward.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner Casilius will second. Okay, I'll do a roll. Commissioner Weaver?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Aye.
Commissioner Shea?
Aye.
And Commissioner Casilius? Aye. Thank you.
Aye. Mark joined as well.
Oh, wonderful. Commissioner Vierling, we just did a roll for the agenda and minutes.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Thank you for speaking up. I was going to ask if we wanted to check on the beep there.
Oh, so. Thank you. Oh, yep, there it is. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Okay, then I think we can just move right into staff reports. Troy?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'll go through the report as appears in your package, just highlighting a few of the items. Technical assistance and cost share requests. You'll see for the month of August, we're running at just above 270 total requests. The vast majority of those, slightly over 200, are within the Scott WMO. And we have slightly over 100 projects that are at various stages of development. Soil health and cover crops, we continue to implement the 5-year strategic plan. Currently, we're working on coordinating the aerial site. That's being proposed for this week, actually. We have about 400 acres lined up so far within the Scott WMO. Skipping down to clean water education, we had 2 workshops that we hosted. One was a Plant Your Native Prairie webinar. We had 38 participants. That was July 23rd, and then July 28th, we hosted a Lawns to Legumes webinar. That's a brand new Bowser program that we received a grant for, and we're working with our local partners, including the WMO, on implementing pollinator plots and habitat within urban environments on multiple parcels. We also, just so you all know, have selected our conservation leader for Scott County in 2020. That person that we selected was Vern Wick. He's a dairy farmer down in Sand Creek Township and has been doing a lot of conservation projects, including cover crops, with us. Under inventory and assessment, we're finalizing our subwatershed assessment for Thole Lake. That'll help us identify cost-effective best management practices and begin prioritizing projects within that watershed area. Zoning support, we continue to provide support to the zoning folks on ag-related issues, including animal welfare, manure spreading, productive acreage, and so on. And livestock operation assistance, this is where we assist larger producers that are expanding. Well, they don't have to be large, but they're expanding or changing their operations and making sure that they're assisted to be in compliance with both local and state feedlot and waste laws. On page 2, Ryan, or next page, monitoring. So we're continuing to the biweekly sampling on Pika Creek for the WMO's monitoring plan this year. And volunteer rainfall monitoring, you'll see the graph there for the last 13 months, and you'll see the farthest right column showing that July precipitation fell just below the average for this month. And those readings are at the Jordan Field Office. The next graph you see is the construction erosion control. This is where we log for you the number of plan reviews we're doing for permits, whether they're new construction for houses or accessories, pools, sheds, etc. That was around 25 total, permit reviews, and the number of inspections was just above 150 for the month, July. The buffer law, so each year we have to do an inspection of 1/3 of the buffers in the county, so we're preparing that. We were just waiting to get some updated aerial photo imagery so that we could, use that instead of going out and looking at every possible buffer out there. We'd use the aerial imagery that's available. And we are currently getting the aerial imagery that was flown in June of 2020. I think Scott County GIS already has some of that uploaded onto their GIS site, so that's going to be very helpful. Wetland Conservation Act, this is just administration of the state of Minnesota's wetland laws. We have about 6 different projects that we did either reviews or notices on. I won't go into detail about each one. Ryan will go to page 3 of the report. And rounding out the report there with the equipment rental program, you'll see we just broke 1,000 acres. That's not all reported yet for this year. We still have the fall season, so you'll see those numbers jumping. We expect that the amount of acres we do have the equipment out for will get closer to the last year's amount, approximately 2,000 acres. So this basically is the first half of the year showing there with our 4 different pieces of equipment. And lastly, I'll just quickly review the technical assistance and cost share program actions taken by the SWC board. This was at their meeting last week. So we have a number of new applications. Ron Malika is cover crops. Steve Schalweg is cover crops. Lowell Schmidt is a wetland restoration. Scott County Parks is a grass waterway. Adam Simon is a cover crops. And Ray Solar has 3 there. One is a conservation cover, which is the upland area surrounding his next project, which is the wetland restoration. You'll see that there's 2 items that are going to be on your that are on your agenda today. Those were screening committee recommendations by our board, which they did approve them, or recommend approval, I should say. One was the Lowell Schmidt, and the other was the Ray Solar, and that is because the cost share policy manual does require the WMO to actually approve wetland restoration projects. There was no funding source changes, and we did issue a number of payments as well. Tony Valetti for his conservation cover, and we did a final payment on that for $10,000. Melissa Bachman for a tree and shrub establishment project, that was $1,200. Corlin Kavish for a conservation cover project, $24,000. Dustin Lambrecht, conservation cover, a little over $11,000. Michael Seifert for his cover crops, $1,060. Adam Simon for his grass waterway, $7,032. And Ryan Stika, we did a final payment on his tree shrub establishment for a little over $11,000. And all the items there that have asterisks by them, that references that there are fact sheets included in your packets of which you can review. With that, Madam Chair, I'll sit for any questions.
Thank you, Troy. Does anybody have any questions?
I do have one question, Troy. The county has been seeing kind of an increase in interest regarding community solar gardens in wetlands. Has the SWCD seen any increased interest through WACA for community solar gardens?
Well, Madam Chair, Vanessa, we had, I would say, in previous years, like in recent previous years, the last 2 or 3 years, but nothing this year.
Okay.
So there was a little flurry there, probably I would say half a dozen or so.
Mm-hmm.
Last year and like I said, previous years, but nothing ramped up as of yet this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Troy?
Troy, this is Commissioner Schmidt. I'm wondering about the buffer law and the 1/3 section. Do you inspect one account? Do you inspect just one of the total areas?
I'm sorry, I'm sure that cut out pretty significantly. I didn't quite catch the gist of the question. Did anybody hear that better than I did?
I think he was, what I caught it was, what part do you go out and inspect? Or what percentage? Is that
Okay.
right?
Sure. So, what we do is we have divided the county into 3 different areas. The north, basically the north half, and then the southeast and southwest. So we don't really do it by township, but we will do 100% of the inspections in each given area when they're due. Like this year, for example, we are focused in the Belle Plaine, Blakely, Helena area. We will review every required buffer in those townships.
Okay, thank you. And do you send that information to the townships as to if they're in compliance?
We don't have that as a standard protocol. However, if there's a request by any township or other entity that would like that information, we are certainly willing to provide it.
Well, I will ask that for Blakely Township at this time.
Very good. I'll make note of that and make sure you get a copy of the report.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I heard a couple more beeps. Vanessa, do we want to check in and see if anybody else joined?
Yeah, I don't see additional. Ryan, do you see any more that I'm not seeing on my?
So since I'm sharing my screen, I can escape out if you want, and then I can look at the log of who's all in.
Nope, it would just be in the waiting room.
I think one of those beeps was me. I had to dump out and jump back in, so that my fault. Sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing anybody.
I think we're good. No.
Any other questions for Troy? All right, hearing none, we can move on for Vanessa's report on the Scott WMO.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Again, another busy month at the WMO and at the county. We were fortunate enough to have a mid-year meeting with SWCD staff. This is something we annually do apparently much earlier in the year, but obviously due to the coronavirus, we weren't able to hold it when we would normally hold it. So the SWCD staff was wonderful in partnering with us to have kind of a late summer meeting to allow us to hold it outside and then meet all of the county protocols for social distancing and numbers. So it was a really, everybody attended and everybody was able to participate. It was for me a very informative and helpful opportunity to really hear directly from all of the staff at both the SWCD and at the WMO, the kind of work that we're doing this year and the challenges and the hurdles and what's going well and, what are the different opportunities. So we were able to hold that this year, and that was, again, wonderful and helpful. The county did kind of settle on a levy to move forward with of 2.52%. Commissioners are gonna work on that on the September board meeting to approve. So we're gonna go ahead and work on that as our preliminary budget levy amount to settle on for the 2021 budget year. So the third item on my list to just let you know is that we are also working on identifying our projects for the watershed-based implementation funding. So the Lower Minnesota River Watershed South group is convening again in September, and at that time, they'll be looking at approaching, with the different capital improvement projects and programs that we would like to put forth for funding. So there's no guarantee. I'm quite certain that many of the agencies will have projects and programs to bring forward for that, $800 and some odd thousand dollars. But we're looking at what we can bring forward at, and I'll be meeting with Troy also this Friday to kind of talk about the budget and those projects that we can do jointly with the SWCD as well. And then the last piece is the county did get the FEMA map certificate. So the FEMA maps have been approved. And so we're working on just, updating the maps officially through the ordinance, working on getting letters out to the residents, and been fielding a lot more increase in calls regarding floodplain in FEMA. So FEMA does generally update their maps about every 5 years. However, they haven't done an overhaul of their maps since about the 70s or 80s, depending upon the county. So this is a pretty big update, and it tends to be a pretty high volume of residents calling in. So it's one other piece that we're working on at this time. There will likely be an SWMO standard update to correlate. It won't be required, but we'll probably bring that forth just to be a little bit more consistent. And with that, I stand for any questions.
I'm sorry I wasn't muted. You may have heard my exclamation. Those maps have been in works forever. When you said they were approved, I was like, oh, wow, because I just can't believe they're finally final.
It's been my whole career, so,
Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, that's good. That's very good. I had a follow-up question. So for the implementation funding, watershed implementation funding, does the county then, we come up with our own list of priority projects, and then we bring it to the lower Minnesota watershed group, and then everyone would discuss and then prioritize everyone's projects? Is that kind of how that works?
Basically, yes, Madam Chair. What the group has been working on for the last several months is our criteria for eligibility and how we will prioritize projects in our area. And so the next step is kind of for everybody to bring those projects forward now that they've been holding on to, and bring them forward for ranking and eligibility. So we'll see where ours end up compared to everybody else's. This is the first time we're doing this, so it could take a little bit, and it might be a little, like the coronavirus, a little unknown as we make it through, but it's a wonderful group, and I'm sure we will make it through. We just won't know if any of our projects will make it for eligible funding, or being brought forth, I guess, I apologize, for funding, until we've gone through that process. So it's a learn-as-you-go process this time.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for Vanessa?
I have one. This is Pam Casilius. Regarding the FEMA map updates, is it possible that a location would fall off their map or get changed somehow? The reason I ask is for personal reasons. Years ago, we were going to refinance our house only to discover we were on a floodplain on West Cedar Lake Drive. And we are probably, 20, 25 feet above the water. The notion that it would flood here was inconceivable to us. But then it was a matter of having to pay to get the map changed and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know, when they're updating, I don't know what that means, being new to this.
Well, Commissioner Casilius, yes, it is definitely feasible that properties can and do fall off the map. They can fall into different floodplains, and properties can also be now put on the map, can also be considered to be in the floodplain now. So both of those things do in fact happen. if you needed a letter of map adjustment previously, and you're not too far from, depending upon where you are, I guess, I apologize, in the floodplain, you may need to, yes, reapply for your map adjustment, so.
For the low price of $600.
Yeah, I can, your mortgage insurance company, if that's one of the issues, usually will accept your existing, but I can happily work with you if you want to talk about it after the meeting.
Yeah, I don't want to drag everybody down into the weeds. It just was interesting to me because I had not heard this, and so, and I, so yeah, I will reach out to you separately. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to help. It is a parcel by parcel based upon where the maps are this time, so.
Okay.
And you can be added and you can be dropped.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I can kind of feel that too. So as part of the process, they would have went through and looked at all the letter of map amendments and either re-verified them or not. They would have looked at each parcel and made the decision about whether it was still good or not. But the other thing is if you're high and outside the floodplain, and it would show up on the LiDAR, you can get it's called a LiDAR for Loma, and all you need is a map that shows several LiDAR lines in between the floodplain and your house footprint on the aerial photo, and FEMA will accept that too. So, Vanessa, are you the floodplain administrator for the county?
I was in a previous position, but I am not at the moment here. So we're looking at adding that. Currently, it's Ron Polbeck.
Okay, because he should be able to help with that, and if he doesn't know about it, he can contact Seal at the DNR, and she can help him.
So what happened is one was just needed to be designated at the county, so it was him, but it's mostly me and Megan that are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, kind of filling in for it, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
Great, thank you for the additional info.
Any other questions for Vanessa?
Or Rita.
I used to work in the floodplain unit at the DNR, so I know all about floodplain.
I can totally tell by how you answered that, and now I know something about you that you probably didn't want me to know, because I'll be calling.
That's all right. Okay, if there are no more questions, let's move on to ongoing business. And Vanessa, I believe you're up again with the fall tour.
I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is, again, just a quick update. We are still moving forward with the fall tour with the SWCD board. Once again, it is going to be a very small event, but a very critical event this year. I just wanted to remind all the commissioners to please RSVP so we can get an accurate head count. Again, we're still following all of the social distancing protocols and all the protocols identified in our operations plan and the event plan through the county. So again, small groups, social distancing, but it won't prevent the event from going through or being very educational. And we'll be mixing groups. So the SWCD board will be intermixed with the WPC board, so you'll have a chance to also connect with those members as well. We'll also be presenting the Conservation Leadership Award, as Troy mentioned, and just a small recognition to Jim, because the county wasn't able to hold their normal recognition event this year. So please get those RSVPs in, and we very much look forward to seeing you at the tour. And that is all.
Any questions for Vanessa on the tour? Okay, I think we can move on to program updates from Melissa.
Okay, just one quick thing about our watercraft inspection program going on. I got a monthly report from Waterfront Restorations. So early July, when they started inspections, the two busiest lakes were Cedar and O'Dowd with about 100 boats per day, and Thole had the lowest traffic. So moving on to Mcmahon Lake, the outlet project, I think it was last Thursday, I went to a township meeting, because the township at our last meeting with the landowners, offered to try to help with, funding the project, and then doing a special assessment with all the landowners. So I went to the township meeting, the board decided that, looking at a subordinate service district would be a better funding option because there was multiple, entities involved, 2 townships, state land, county land. So, we had that discussion today with taxation. But also in that meeting, we talked about the traffic and kind of the safety concerns. Bob Grudman did a lot of the talking. He's a landowner on Mcmahon Lake. He asked him for some kind of signage, you know, something that we could slow traffic down, especially when there's 30 or 40 cars parked along both sides of the roadway. And they agreed to talk about and discuss some kind of a caution signs on the road. And then I also requested that they consider maybe putting up no parking signs on one side of the road to kind of try to keep the road a little bit wider. So they didn't make any decisions that night. They decided that they would discuss it and come back at a later time. Today's meeting was with Cindy Geis and Dana Anderson from our Taxation and Land Records Department and Spring Lake Township to talk about a subordinate service district to be able to fund the outlet. That was an interesting conversation. Cindy is a brilliant person for knowing all that tax stuff and tax statutes. It's very complicated. But what it comes down to is there's really 2 options. The township to fund it through a special assessment called under Chapter 429, but they would have to do a waiver. So Chapter 429 requires that the amount of money that they're going to fund this particular investment or project with has to add value, that much value to the property also. And then the other option would be, Vanessa brought up a lake improvement district, having Mcmahon Lake, having the landowners request to the county to set up a lake improvement district, which sounds like the best option because the other question is operations and maintenance. We knew we'd have to put together a plan for that, but how are we going to have a fund to keep up that operation and maintenance, and who's gonna manage that fund and hold that money in escrow? So a lake improvement district can do that. So I'm gonna put together an email to all the Mcmahon Lake landowners, kind of describing all of this detail and, you know, the option is still there with the township, although they have to talk to their attorney about doing a waiver. Because there is a waiver process with the 429 if the land value doesn't, or if the cost of the project doesn't add enough value to the property. But that still doesn't create a fund for future operation and maintenance and to collect that money. And so, you know, an LID sounds like the best option. So I'll put together that email this week and send that out to them, but yeah, that's all I have on that. Does anybody have any questions? Or Vanessa, did I miss anything important?
No, you did a wonderful job. The other thing I might add is, you know, some of these things like a lake improvement district, you know, I've worked with them before and obviously, Commissioner Casilius is aware, you know, familiar with them as well. They do have to be driven, you know, by the residents, by the property owner. A lake improvement district is not something that is put forward or driven by a WMO. So all we are doing is giving them their options and can help them understand what those processes are. But, you know, it becomes the property owners that really need to drive that, if that's something that they want to do. But there's at least some paths forward, and as Melissa mentioned, they all are far more complicated with than cons. So, that's all I had.
Any follow-up questions for Melissa? Hearing none, we can move on to Ryan with project updates.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good evening. Just a few brief updates for you. One, we're in the process of our final CIP payment. So that should go out here in September, and that would mark the kind of final step in all the recent CIPs that we had completed. So that was on project number 5. Secondly, we are continuing to perform status reviews on existing projects, both our CIPs or other projects that we, the WMO, are responsible for. It was discovered that one of our riparian buffers, that's just east of New Prague, is kind of struggling with the planting. And so we believe as though there was an herbicide treatment that was done to kind of, more or less, we wanted to knock back the reed canary grass because it's so thick along the stream. That herbicide had some type of carryover where the plants are largely dead on that side. So we're in conversations with Great River Greening, who helped us with the project, just to go out there and maybe better understand what happened, and then kind of come up with a plan moving forward. So that will be a project that will kind of go on to our maintenance list in terms of needing to go back out there and make some adjustments to it. Don't know yet what that is, but if I had to gather, I think because the mortality rate is so high on one side of the creek, that we're probably best served to start over. If it's possible to save some of the trees and shrubs that are living, we'll do our best to do that as well. We'll continue doing site inspections, so there's a few more sites that need to be looked at. For the most part, though, things are in pretty good shape out there. If you remember from the previous meeting, we do have some other maintenance, and that is still on schedule, so we're hoping to have that work done here. One piece of it was cleaning out a culvert at the Quarry Creek project. That one we're hoping to have done here in August or September. And then there is some work on one CIP and another spot on Quarry Creek where access is through a farm field, so we'll have that done in November after the crops come out. All the landowners have been contacted, they're on board with it, so they've kind of given permissions for us to go in there at that time and complete the work. We do have a site visit lined up with our MPCA representative, who has been working with us on our EPA grant. His name is Mark Hansen, and he's actually out of the, I think it's the Marshall office. He's in western Minnesota, and so it's a little bit of a drive for him to come here. So he's got several different sites that he's going to look at over, I believe, a couple-day time period. So he's asked to look at one native prairie planting site and then one CIP, and so I lined up the site visits with both landowners to make sure that that was okay to go out there and take this representative to look at the sites. So we'll do that next week, and there's also a report that has to be submitted to them as well. It is, from my understanding, it's an annual report that we need to submit. But I believe this is the first time that we'll be submitting it, and we're a few years into the grant. So it might be just a new stipulation that they've come up with. With that, I'll stand for any questions about any of the aforementioned projects.
Any questions for Ryan? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move on to new business. Starting with Ray Solar Wetland Restoration application.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, bear with me here as I scroll through to find that one. So before we get started, if you notice, both of these tax applications that we're reviewing, they are a joint project. And I'll point that out here on the fact sheet where you can see that the SWCD puts together. You can see the boundaries they're tied together. So first, we'll discuss the Ray Solar project. This wetland restoration is located in Belle Plaine Township, Section 14, Scott County. The total estimated cost of the project is $55,992.10. This one has quite a bit of funding splits here, which it's got 4 different sources. One being the WMO at $11,375.10. The SWCD through their Clean Water Fund grant would also contribute $14,707.22. CRP is the biggest portion, and they're contributing $27,412.78. And then the landowner themselves would contribute $2,497. The source of the funding for this project would come from our local general fund, which we've had these funds earmarked for this project for some time. So if you recall, we've talked about how we don't have funds for, or I should say we have very little funds moving forward for projects. However, we have been going through a ranking and batching period through the summer, and this project was one of them. And we were waiting for the CRP component of it to get finalized so we could put together some of the other numbers. And my understanding too, and Troy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually ended up with less than what we were thinking the WMO would have to contribute towards this project. So we do have one more screening and ranking period in September, so those funds then will go towards potentially another project that's kind of on the waiting list. So this wetland has historically been drained by a tile line. This site is actually one that we have planned for the SWCD and WMO tour. So it's meant to represent a wetland restoration site before work is completed on it. And then another part of the tour is actually seeing a wetland that's already been restored. So kind of a side note about the site itself. The proposed restoration will result in 7.66 acres of wetland being restored. It's in conjunction, like I had previously mentioned, with the neighboring landowner, Lowell Schmidt, which will then also result in 1.9 acres of restored wetlands. And with all our wetland restoration contracts, they're for 15 years, and normally our other projects are all for 10, except in the case of cover crops where they're less. The reason it's before you is that all our wetland restoration projects do require a review by the screening committee and the WPC, and also, as Troy had mentioned, that the SWCD screening committee members did review it and approved it at their August 18th board meeting. And with that, I'll stand for any questions, and I'll kind of point out here, so the red boundary is Ray Solar's property, and you'll then notice after we are done with this one, we'll review the other application. This green portion here is the split, and so that would represent the Lowell Schmidt's portion. So this application is for everything within the red boundary that's marked in green, and then the next application is for everything that will be on the opposite side of the road.
Question for the other commissioners. Any reason we would want to vote on these separately since they kind of go together? And I guess question for Vanessa, can we do that?
Madam Chair, I'll be honest, I don't actually know if you can or cannot. I would probably say, that Ryan could present both, and you could choose to approve both at once. But you can't, approve them as one application, because they were submitted as two.
Okay.
Which
Can I,
is like,
yeah, I would say, can I suggest that we would go through the second one and just see them both?
Yeah.
Unless any of the other commissioners would rather, have an action on them one at a time.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Shea. Just to clarify for myself, so on the solar property, we're looking at one project that has a total of 63,500, 63,622, and another one that's at 55,900. Is that correct? And this is all for like a 7.5 acre piece?
Madam
Is that
Chair,
correct, Brian?
Commissioner Shea, yeah, so, the total of $55,992.10 would be for the solar project, and then the, Schmidt's project is for the $7,695, so yes, they total greater than 60,000, yes.
Okay, and that's to make basically a 9-some acre wetland, basically, we're looking at that, that's correct?
Correct, yep, so, and the reason is there's a culvert under, the road here, which is why Ray Solar couldn't do the project solely on his property, because it will put water through the culvert onto Lowell Schmidt's property.
Ryan, can I have clarification?
Yep. Certainly, yes.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Shea, the number of acres represented by this application with the solar, which you correctly noted was slightly above 9 acres, is for the inundated area only. There is additional wetland perimeter, which is still wetland, but it's not gonna have permanent water on it, it'll just be wet enough to be wetland. We call that a wet meadow. There'll be additional acres in that when you add them together is much more than 9 acres. I would have to check on my records here as to what the total is, but again, that only represents a majority, but still just a portion of the total wetland. I will look up the other acreage, if you just give me a minute, I'll have that number.
Any other questions on that first one, or do we want to have a motion on that first one, or should we move on to talk about the Lowell Schmidt?
Well, Commissioner Shea, the way I understand it, the Lowell Schmidt is, we have to do it just like they said, because they're tied together. Okay, you can't do one without the other, is that correct?
I imagine you could, but it would probably be more expensive.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Shea, no, they are tied together, so by, breaking the tile line, it would inevitably have to put water through that culvert. So, yes, essentially they are, sort of an all or nothing.
However, they did come in as two separate applications.
Okay.
Correct. With them being separate landowners, then they have their own contracts that they would fulfill.
I would suggest we talk about the Lowell Schmidt restoration first, unless anyone has objections.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, without hearing any objections, I'll go through the Lowell Schmidt's application. So it's kind of a repeat of a lot of the same information. You know, location is all still the same. The estimated cost of this project is $7,695, and the proposed funding would all come from the WMO. Once again, we do have the funds available to cover this cost as well. This restoration represents the 1.9 acres of wetland, and then Ray Solers is the 7.66 acres of restored wetland. And then also, the reason why it's here, wetland restoration projects do all require a review from the WPC, and it was approved by the SWCD Screening Committee members at their August 18th board meeting. And the last note I'll add too is that you know, the WMO's philosophy has been a heavy emphasis on runoff reducing practices, which wetland restorations fit the bill for those practices. And historically, we have not had much success in getting these size of wetland projects, just due to, and you can see, which is evidenced by this project, is there's multiple landowners involved in a lot of these cases. The property lines don't necessarily follow contour lines in terms of, you know, where it's going to put water. So that, I just wanted to add that in there too, that we typically don't get projects that are this size for wetlands.
And Madam Chair, if I could provide that number of additional acres.
Yes, thank you, Troy.
So in addition to the roughly 9.5 acres that you see on the amounts in the packet, there's an additional 7.34 acres that is being covered by the federal Crp program and the Scott SWCD Clean Water Fund grant. That's why those items are not on your agendas, because the approval for those was done by the SWCD board. But when you add the 7.34 to those other acreages that you have, it comes to 16.9 total wetland acres.
Thank you. All right, any questions for Ryan on either of these?
I do have one. This is Commissioner Casilius. Explain to me where it says the contract is for 15 years, and I heard somebody say previously there are usually 10. I don't know what the contract means.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Casilius. Yes, so the contract is, they're included in the packets for both of these. So the document I'm showing right now, so each landowner that wants to participate in the program fills out an application. And then once it's approved, you know, we change the terminology then to the contract. On here, we have, it outlines based on the practice type. So in this case, we've got a wetland restoration, which is the practice type. And then it gives all the financial numbers to it as well. And then under terms and conditions number 3, it has the term, you know, how long is this contract in effect for, where the landowner has to complete the operation and maintenance activities. So in our docket, which outlines all the various practices that the WMO offers, cost share or financial assistance for, we outline then a specified contract, term, and so I would say everything but just the cover crops and the wetlands. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that deviates, but, other than that, every other practice, so our structural practices, the grass waterways and water and sediment basins, native grasses, all of those are 10-year terms. And in this case for wetlands, because, you know, we're putting such a heavy emphasis on this practice, we would like the term to be higher, and so we set that, that term to be higher than some of the other practices that we offer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Ryan, or do we have a motion to approve? And I believe we have to do these separately.
Yes, we can go to Ray's first.
Again, this is Commissioner Shea. I just got one question, Ryan, or maybe someone can just kind of clear this up for me. I'm just looking at the different things, the proposed projects for the solar. And I'm seeing the one that's, you know, the 50, that we, you know, the WMO has $55,000. And then the other one for $63,000. So there's the two different projects going on here on this property. I mean, it's just the amount of money going into this, between the two.
Yeah, so it does.
And with the, talk about that because it's not, doesn't have WMO money in it.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Shea, no, we certainly can discuss it. So yes, it does have the component of the conservation cover as well, and so it is a higher dollar amount, but also that comes with the acreage that the landowner is putting into the program. And so, you know, in terms of at least the wetland on the solar project, the costs are distributed fairly well amongst the different funding agencies. And two, we're using the rates that we put in the docket. And so any landowner that would come in the door, you know, it's dependent upon the amount of acres that they would be putting into the program, and then that's just what we use to go off of the rate that we established in the docket. And so in the case of solars, it's just a significant amount of land between the wetland and the conservation cover is why it is so high. You know, we've sort of in the docket to lessen the costs in terms of the amount of acreage when the landowner is putting in higher amounts of land into the flat rate payments, that it actually comes down the rate. And so the lower the amount of acres you put in, you'd be at the maximum amount, and then there's increases to the amount of acres as you go higher. The rates actually come down, and that's meant to try to distribute the funds to you know, amongst the landowners. And the reason why this project ranked higher than some of the other projects is because of that, the emphasis of wetland restorations being the practice that is high up in the rankings in terms of what the WMO is looking for, along with native grasses as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Yes, Mr. Shagan, sounds good. Yeah, I was just looking at the totals on both. You know, you're looking at about and this is across the board with everything, you're looking at about $120,000 worth between the two projects, with a home or with landowner investment of less than $8.
Madam Chair,
I just
Commissioner
wanted
Shea.
information for that so I know what to vote on or not.
Yep, and so with the flat rate, you know, it's essentially they're dedicating that land to the program for you know, X amount of years. In the case of the wetlands, it's 15, and then in the case of the native grasses, it's 10. And so there's very little in terms of, or I shouldn't say very little, but there's less of the input costs in terms of a structural practice versus wetlands. And so too, with the wetland restoration, to try to incentivize landowners to do the practice, since we've historically not had very much luck, it does have a higher rate on the cost share for construction. So if you notice the page, I don't know if you can see it right now, but it shows that it's 90% cost share for wetlands, and that's by design. You know, that's why we have it so much higher, is based on this particular practice versus other practices. The highest they can get, I believe, is 80%, and that's even doing, you know, additional steps in terms of our kind of tiered approach.
The way I understood it before, there was CRP money for this, in this project too, on some of the additional acres we were talking about, that is a possibility for the landowner as well.
Are you referencing the conservation cover practice, the one we're not looking at today? Commissioner Shea, was that in reference to the conservation cover item, or is that in reference to the
I thought they
wetland?
were talking about what the additional acreage out there, that there would be some CRP money, but maybe I just misunderstood that, that's all, and that's fine.
Okay.
Well, that's the federal share, isn't it? Isn't that all CRP funds?
Yep, so the
It's all
federal,
CRP.
Yeah, so that 27,000 on page 16, I have the packet next to that I'm kind of looking at. I don't know if you can show that page too, but, is CRP, and then the 43,875 on the previous page is CRP. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps, I'm good, I'm ready to move on, thank you.
Other questions for Ryan? Motion to approve? I'm guessing I can make a motion, so I would like to move that we approve the application as presented for the Ray Solar Wetland Restoration, and, we'll have to do it separately, won't we? So do we have a second?
Commissioner Bierling, I'll second that.
Vanessa, if you're calling us out, you're on mute.
Yes, I just caught that. Oh, Madam Chair. Commissioner Weaver?
Aye.
Commissioner Bierling?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt? Commissioner Schmidt? Okay, we'll come back. Commissioner Shea?
Hey,
Commissioner Casilius?
I'm undecided, I'd have to say nay.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Did that come through?
One more time, please.
I've got it off mute, and you said aye.
Okay.
I believe the motion is passed then, if we're 3-2. I see you nodding. All right, I'm going to move on with a motion to approve the Lowell Schmidt's Wetland Restoration as presented.
Commissioner Weaver?
Do we need a second?
Oh, I apologize.
Commissioner Schmidt, I'll second that.
Now I'll do the roll, I apologize. Commissioner Weaver?
Aye.
Commissioner Veerley?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Aye.
Commissioner Shea?
Since they're both tied in together, I'll say aye.
Commissioner Casilius?
Aye.
All right, the motion is passed. I hope it's okay for me to jump in and say if there are concerned about the funding, I'm sure that Ryan would be more than happy to discuss it with anyone who has additional questions. And I'm also familiar with the program, so I'd be happy to talk through it with anyone too, if that's all right to volunteer that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, certainly, I'd be happy to discuss it with anybody and kind of show the breakdown and the percentages of who's contributing what to the project, absolutely.
I think it might also be helpful just to talk through just funding mechanisms and how the state and federal programs contribute to these two and how we have specific funding set up for these types of projects too, if questions come up.
Certainly.
I think for me too, it would be helpful to know how we kind of rank order these kind of projects as they come in. I mean, it does seem like an awful lot of money for this particular effort, and I don't know where that falls within all of the things we get tapped into for funding.
I think that's a good point. Can we put that on a future agenda to like go through that at a meeting? Is that okay?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm taking notes now, and we will bring this to you at a later meeting date this year.
Is that okay, Commissioner Casilius, or should we spend some time on it today?
Nope, that works fine for me. Thank you.
Okay, next subject would be the budget amendment reallocation for a fund for pumping. Vanessa.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. As Melissa was discussing earlier, we're currently working through different grant options and funding mechanisms for assisting with the permanent outlet project for Mcmahon. In the meantime, it does appear that the lake's going to be considerably higher this year again, and may need to be drawn down. So the purpose of this agenda item is to review a proposed budget amendment and provide a recommendation for the county board consideration. So a budget amendment is something we as the SWMO and WMOs in general routinely do perform in response to natural resource issues that are unknown when the current year budget is adopted and for other reasons. For this particular proposed amendment is specifically for the temporary pumping for Mcmahon Lake in 2020. So in order to protect the previous SWMO investment in the shoreline restoration, protect human health and water quality by reducing the risk of septic discharge from high water caused by lack of a natural outlet and changing local climate, the SWMO may coordinate a temporary pumping of Mcmahon under all of the following conditions. The pumping is temporary and not a long-term management solution. The pumping does meet the goals and priorities of the SWMO or protects a previous SWMO investment. As for pumping, does not require the SWMO to obtain additional easements or purchase easements. The lake level exceeds the OHW of 965.2 by more than 2 feet for 60 consecutive days. The lake will not be pumped below the OHW of 965.2. We wouldn't be allowed that under permitting anyway. The SWO will not contribute more than 50% of the cost of pumping. Now, we do realize that, you know, not necessarily all of the partners involved, the townships and the property owners, have the funds available at this time. So the SWMO would be willing to, just pay for the pumping themselves right now and just, kind of credit that towards the full outlet project. And then the costs must be available in the current annual budget, and they don't require using reserves when the fund balance is below 35%. Currently, reserves for the SWMO are closer to about 27%. So for 2020, the available funds will have to be reallocated from the Mcmahon Lake Outlet Project. That's the only funds we have available. The current Mcmahon Lake Outlet Project budget is $130,000. The pumping allocation will not exceed $30,000. The fiscal impact would be up to $30,000, may be reallocated in 2020 towards temporary pumping of Mcmahon Lake. The funds will be reallocated from the Mcmahon Lake Outlet Project, which is current budget we have set aside of $130,000. I do just want to add, part of the drive of this is, you know, the residents have been very, very invested and are working very hard with both the SWMO, the township, and the agencies to try to find a long-term permanent resolution. So we, staff do feel that there is sufficient support from the community to continue working on this effort, and do, feel that pursuing a permanent outlet, is a goal that we do choose to continue on. So, I stand for questions.
Any questions for Vanessa? Do we have a motion for this?
Commissioner Beerling, I'd make a motion to approve the budget amendment and reallocate the funds for the pumping of Mcmahon Lake.
Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Casilius, I'll second.
Okay, I will do a roll. Commissioner Weaver.
Aye.
Commissioner Beerling.
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
And Commissioner Casilius.
Aye.
Right, the motion has passed. That is our agenda for tonight. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So I'll jump at once.
Commissioner Shea, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Beerling, I'll second that.
Commissioner Weaver.
Aye.
Commissioner Beerling.
Aye.
Commissioner Schmidt.
Aye.
Commissioner Shea.
Aye.
And Commissioner Casilius.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, the motion has passed. We will adjourn the meeting and look forward to the tour next month.